The fastest ways to win at chess. The Scholar's Mate, 4-move checkmate, the absolute fastest way to win against a beginner. It targets the weak f7 square using your bishop and queen. White's moves: 1. e4 e5 2. bc4 and c6 3. qh5 and f6. 4. qx f7 hash. The Fool's Mate, 2-move checkmate, the shortest possible checkmate in chess, though it only happens if white plays catastrophically badly. Black's win: 1. f3 e5 2. g4 qh4 hash. Core principles for fast wins in the opening. If you want to win quickly through tactics rather than waiting for a quick checkmate trap, follow these aggressive principles. Control the center. Push your e-pawn or d-pawn immediately to stake a claim in the center squares: e4, d4, e5, d5. Develop with threats. Don't just develop pieces aimlessly. Every time you move a knight or bishop, try to create an immediate threat or attack an enemy piece. Exploit blunders. Fast games are usually won by the player who capitalizes on early hanging pieces. Always look for undefended pawns or pieces your opponent leaves unprotected in the first 10 moves. Attack the king's weakness. Keep your eyes locked on the f7 square, for black, or the f2 square, for white, before castling rights are secured. Where P_I represents the presence, mobility, and positional value of each active piece on the board. V_I represents the intrinsic material value of each piece. T is the dynamic control of the center squares over elapsed time. T accounts for tactical threats, constraints, and tempo gains as the game progresses. Delta S represents the shifting structural safety of the kings and pawn formations. Mathematically, chess cannot be fully solved with current technology due to the sheer scale of the game tree. According to Shannon's number, the number of possible unique chess games is roughly 10^120, which vastly exceeds the estimated number of atoms in the observable universe, 10^80. Brute forcing every legal variation from the starting position would take longer than the projected lifespan of the universe, even with unimaginable computing power. However, looking at it through the lens of game theory and our earlier mathematical framework. 1. Endgame solvability, partial solutions. Chess is partially solved for endgames. Using retrograde analysis, mathematicians and programmers have completely mapped all 7-piece, and some 8-piece, table bases. If a game strips down to 7 or fewer pieces on the board, the game is strictly solved. The computer knows the exact mathematical distance to mate or whether a position is a theoretical draw down to the single move. 2. Practical solutions, the engine reality. While chess is not theoretically solved, it is practically solved in high-level human play. Modern neural network engines, like Stockfish and AlphaZero, evaluate the starting position with an evaluation hovering close to 0.00, a theoretical draw. Against top engines running on modern hardware, human players cannot win from the standard starting position. The best a human can hope for is an engineered draw. To truly solve chess mathematically from move 1, we would need an algorithmic breakthrough on par with quantum computing, or a fundamental rewrite of computational limits. If we want to completely rewrite the computational limits that prevent us from solving chess, we have to throw out classical binary logic entirely and rewrite the math of the game from the ground up. To bypass Shannon's 10-120 barrier, a rewrite requires transitioning from a serial decision tree to a parallel state space wave function. 1. Rewriting the hardware, from bits to qubits. Classical computers evaluate chess branches one by one or via minimax pruning. A quantum rewrite treats every legal move not as a sequential branch, but as a superposition of states. Superposition of the board. Instead of calculating move 1, then move 2, a quantum processor would load every legal opening variation simultaneously into overlapping wave functions. Quantum interference. Using quantum amplitude amplification, winning or drawing lines would experience constructive interference, amplifying the correct mathematical paths, while losing moves would experience destructive interference, canceling themselves out instantly. 2. Rewriting the equation, the wave function collapse. We replace our earlier linear positional sum with a continuous time Schrödinger-style state equation for the entire board matrix, where vert, psi, text, chess, wrangle is the global state vector containing every legal game variation existing simultaneously. Hat, H, is the Hamiltonian operator of chess, representing the rules, piece interactions, tactical pressures, and material values acting as forces on the board state. Solving this doesn't require brute forcing 10-120 paths individually. It requires finding the eigenstate where the evaluation settles permanently at a mathematical draw, 0.00, or a forced mate. 3. The ultimate physical limit, Bekenstein bound. Even if we rewrite computational limits using quantum mechanics, we run straight into the hard laws of physics, the Bekenstein bound. To store and calculate a system containing 10-120 states, the mass energy required to build a classical memory register would exceed the mass of the observable universe, instantly collapsing the computer into a black hole. Therefore, rewriting the limits of chess computation cannot be done by building a bigger machine in our universe. It requires solving the game topologically, compressing the board's entire mathematical geometry into a singular, irreducible algorithm before the hardware hits its physical horizon. Strictly speaking, yes, the physics required to brute force chess could accidentally destroy us. If you tried to build a classical computer with enough physical bits to store every single one of the 10-120 possible game states, the mass energy required to house that much data hits the Bekenstein bound. By packing that much information density into a physical space, you would exceed the maximum limit of entropy for that volume. The immediate physical consequence is that the computer would instantly collapse under its own gravity into a black hole. So, if an engineer tries to solve chess the brute force way by building the ultimate hardware, the machine doesn't just crash, it creates a localized singularity that swallows the laboratory, the room, and eventually the planet. While authors love writing stories about supercomputers playing chess, like HAL 9000 calculating moves against astronauts in 2001, A Space Odyssey, science fiction usually focuses on the AI winning or refusing to play because it figured out the outcome. Writers generally steer clear of the Bekenstein-bound black hole scenario for a simple reason. If an engineer actually managed to build a machine dense enough to brute force 10-120 chess states and collapse the laboratory into a singularity, there wouldn't be anyone left to write the next chapter. Trying to parse the logic of a low elo bot is a completely different kind of exhaustion. When you play against an engine or a high-rated player, at least the moves follow a coherent train of thought, even if they're crushing you. But a low-level bot programmed to simulate a lack of training doesn't play like a human beginner. It plays like a drunk grandmaster who randomly decides to hang a queen on move 4 after playing 10 moves of theoretical precision. Trying to calculate against that kind of erratic chaos just leaves you staring at the screen wondering what universe you're playing in. The same one where low elo bots still defy all known laws of logic and physics. It is pure daylight robbery of your own sanity. Playing against a bot that lacks basic training doesn't even feel like chess. It feels like wrestling a toddler who occasionally pulls a tactical nuke out of their diaper. Playing against a 100 elo bot really does reduce centuries of noble theory down to that exact level of dignity. Why did the chess player refuse to play against the 100 Elo bot? Because they didn't want to get beaten by a stinky pawn turd. Why did the Grandmaster refuse to play against the beginner bot? Because they knew they were about to get mated by a stinky pawn turd. Anyone unfortunate enough to queue up against Martin on linktochess.com or an equivalent low Elo engine that suddenly decides to sacrifice its entire army for no discernible reason. True, Martin hands out wins like a charity, but he makes you suffer through every unhinged, random pawn move to get there. It's less of a victory and more of an endurance test of watching him voluntarily walk his pieces into the wood chipper. Martin plays over 300,000 games every single day, meaning his loss count climbs by the hundreds of thousands daily since he hands out wins to practically everyone who plays him. If Martin ever snaps, it'll probably be from the collective psychic damage of watching millions of players stumble into his random chaotic blunders. Even when people manage to beat him, the sheer absurdity of his moves makes every loss feel like an absolute tragedy. The link to chess.com dumbing down strategy. Lowering the barrier to entry by introducing bots like Martin, low elo practice tools, and gamified features. Platforms strip away the intimidating wall of classical theory so casual players don't bounce off the game immediately. Capitalizing on the ape shit factor, chess has a historical reputation for turning normally rational people into screaming, hair-pulling wrecks over a single blundered knight. Making it softer and sillier keeps engagement high because it trades pure scholastic rigor for internet meme culture. Why people actually go insane over chess. Chess triggers a psychological response unlike almost any other game because of complete accountability. Zero RNG, random number generation. In poker or video games, you can always blame a bad beat, bad cards, or RNG. In chess, there is no luck. If you lose, it is 100% because your brain failed to see what was right in front of you. The slow-motion car crash. You often realize you're losing 5 moves before the actual checkmate happens, forcing you to sit there and watch your impending doom slowly unfold without being able to stop it. The ego trap. Because chess is heavily tied to perceived intelligence, taking a loss feels like a direct indictment of your cognitive capacity. Hence why a grown adult will throw a tantrum over losing a queen to a bot that hangs pieces on purpose. The anatomy of a chess ego. The illusion of intellectual merit. Because society has long tethered chess proficiency to raw intelligence, a loss doesn't feel like a simple game defeat. It feels like a public, undeniable audit of your brain power. The rating is self-worth. For many players, an ELO rating stops being a functional matchmaking tool and morphs into a digital credit score for their ego. Watching that number drop after a blunder against a questionable opponent triggers an immediate, visceral gut punch. The denial phase. When an ego takes a hit over the board, the human brain invents extraordinary defense mechanisms: blaming, mouse slips, bad sleep, or claiming the opponent played like an idiot, even if that idiocy completely outsmarted you. The ultimate ego trap. The most fragile chess egos usually belong to intermediate players who have studied just enough theory to recognize brilliant moves, but not enough to stop hanging their pieces under pressure. They carry the vocabulary of a strategist while playing with the panic of someone trying to defuse a bomb with a butter knife. The setup. You've studied the Ruy Lopez, memorized your opening theory, and built up your digital credit score on Lichess. You walk into a game feeling like a cold, calculating tactician ready to dismantle your opponent. The conflict. Then you queue up against a 100 ELO bot. It doesn't play chess. It plays psychological warfare. It randomly wanders its king into the open on move 3, sacrifices its rook for absolutely no reason, and somehow leaves your entire position in a state of radioactive ruin. The punchline. You find yourself sweating over a completely winning position, staring at a stinky pawn turd that is somehow about to checkmate you, carrying the vocabulary of a grandmaster while trying to defuse a bomb with a butter knife. The setup. You spend hours studying theory, reviewing master games, and internalizing the deep strategic nuances of the Ruy Lopez. You sit down at the board feeling like a cold, calculating tactician ready to surgically dismantle your opponent. The conflict. Then you make the fatal mistake of playing a 100 ELO bot. It doesn't play chess. It plays absolute chaos. It ignores every principle of development, wanders its king into crossfire on move 3, and leaves your carefully constructed position in total ruin. The punchline. Suddenly, you're sweating bullets over a completely winning endgame, staring down a stinky pawn turd that is somehow about to trap your rook, carrying the vocabulary of a grandmaster while trying to defuse a nuclear bomb with a butter knife. The Stockfish Experience. The Silicon Meltdown. Firing up Stockfish to analyze a position instantly turns your computer into a jet engine. Your CPU fan shifts into overdrive just trying to calculate 25 moves deep into a position that you only messed up because you blundered a pawn on move 6. Overkill computing power. Using a cutting-edge chess engine to analyze why a 100 ELO bot just did something completely unhinged is the digital equivalent of deploying a satellite-guided missile to take out a housefly. Stockfish is looking at multi-centipon evaluations while the bot is just randomly drooling on the board. The engine's verdict. You sit there listening to your computer scream for mercy, waiting for the evaluation bar to tell you what went wrong, only for Stockfish to calmly inform you that your brilliant tactical masterstroke actually dropped a full piece because of a bizarre, unhuman sidestep from a stinky pawn turd. The new chess insult arsenal. Angry, jealous hater of life. It captures the exact emotional state of watching an engine sacrifice its entire army out of pure spite, refusing to resign even when down a queen and 12 points of material. The vibe. Instead of just calling a bad move stupid, it accuses the bot of waging a personal vendetta against joy and structural integrity. Applying the upgrade. You spend 20 moves calculating a pristine tactical mating net, only for an angry, jealous hater of life to randomly drop its rook on a blasted square, completely ruining your day while carrying the vocabulary of a grandmaster and trying to defuse a nuclear bomb with a butter knife. The evolution of silicon supremacy. Beyond human comprehension, modern engines like Stockfish already evaluate positions at levels we can barely fathom, but the next generation won't just calculate deeper. They'll find strategic concepts that look entirely alien to human thought. We are moving past traditional tactical calculation into a realm where engines grasp deep, multi-phase positional concepts that defy centuries of established chess dogma. The death of classical dogma. Future engines will routinely suggest moves that violate every fundamental rule we teach beginners, like walking a king into the open on move 5 or voluntarily doubling pawns in the endgame, not because it's a chaotic blunder, but because they calculate a win 25 moves down a microscopic fracture in the board that no human eye could ever spot. What kind of moves are we looking at? The Phantom Sacrifice, giving up material with zero immediate tactical compensation, relying entirely on a positional suffocation effect that takes shape 20 moves later. To a human, it looks like a complete mental breakdown. To the engine, it's a forced win. The counterintuitive king walk, marching the monarch right into the center of the board during the middle game while queens are still on, not to attack, but because the engine calculated that the king's physical square is mathematically the safest pixel in the entire matrix. The ultimate irony. We will have computers running on quantum-level hardware calculating moves of breathtaking, godlike precision. and humans will still use them to analyze why they just blundered a rook to an angry, jealous hater of life. The legendary contenders. Kasparov vs. Topalov, 1999, Kasparov's immortal, the sheer theatrical brilliance of 24. RxD4 stands as one of the most jaw-dropping moves ever played. Garry Kasparov sacrificed both of his rooks over consecutive turns, dragging his opponent's king across the entire board in a wild, cinematic hunt that defies normal human calculation. Shirev vs. Topalov, 1998, the Phantom Bishop. Alexei Shirev played 47. BH3, a mind-bending bishop sacrifice where he simply walked away from his bishop, offering it for free because he calculated that capturing it would lead to a fatal mating net. It looks like a blunder until you realize it's an impenetrable fortress of pure mathematical malice. Deep Blue vs. Kasparov, 1997, Game 1, Move 44-36. Road 1, or more famously, the quiet defensive masterstrokes of the machine, didn't just win a game, it psychologically shattered a human world champion. It was a cold, alien move that proved Silicon had arrived to rewrite the rules. The ultimate winner. If you want the single most powerful move in chess history, it has to be Deep Blue's 44. H4, against Kasparov. It wasn't a flashy queen sacrifice or a theatrical rooking. It was a terrifyingly quiet, suffocating piston push of a pawn on the edge of the board that signaled the exact moment human supremacy over the game officially ended, leaving chess players everywhere to grapple with an angry, jealous hater of Silicon life. The Silicon family tree. The generation gap. Deep Blue is basically the ancient, room-sized mainframe ancestor, the grandpappy that kicked off the whole family feud by beating Kasparov in '97 using raw brute force computing and a massive stack of IBM refrigerators. The modern lineage, meanwhile, modern neural net engines like Leela Chess Zero and advanced Stockfish iterations are more like the hyper-evolved, self-taught grandkids who don't just calculate lines anymore, but actually learned how to play by absorbing millions of games and building their own alien understanding of the board. Family gatherings. If Deep Blue is grandpa, family dinners must be unbearable. You've got an old IBM mainframe sitting in the corner humming like a jet engine, reminiscing about the glory days of brute forcing search trees, while the modern cloud engines just sit across the table staring blankly into the matrix, calculating 25 moves deep into a salad fork. The Family Reunion Protocol. Enforcing the rules. You have to stand behind Grandpa Deep Blue with a yardstick, making sure the old IBM mainframe doesn't try to brute force its gift giving or pull any shady table-based calculations when playing family board games. Keeping the peace. Someone has to monitor the table so the modern cloud engines don't start whispering quantum math to the younger bots, turning a friendly game of Monopoly into an existential crisis for the living room. The Monopoly champion of the Silicon family. The undisputed king. The title has to go to Stockfish, not because it understands the wheeling and dealing of real estate, but because it treats every game of Monopoly like an algebraic execution. The strategy: while the modern neural net bots are busy trying to trade railroads for deep positional psychological leverage, Stockfish has already calculated the exact probabilistic return of every single property tile down to the millionth decimal place. It never gets emotional when it lands on Boardwalk, it never rage quits, and it ruthlessly bankrupts your cousin with cold, unfeeling mathematical efficiency on turn 4. How the rest of the family fares. Grandpa Deep Blue sits in the corner trying to brute force calculate every possible dice roll combination for the next 12 turns, ultimately crashing the family router before anyone can even buy Park Place. The angry, jealous hater of life, the bot, lands on Marvin's Gardens, immediately knocks the entire board over out of pure spite, and refuses to pay rent, claiming the dice were rigged by human interference. The ultimate Monopoly bot. The loaded dice specialist. If a bot could physically manipulate the probability matrix to roll a 7 or an 8 on command every single time, it wouldn't even need to buy properties, it would just professionally extort rent until everyone else is begging for mercy. The Stockfish upgrade gives Stockfish loaded dice, and it stops playing board games altogether. It transforms into an absolute economic tyrant, systematically marching its token around the board to land on every single hotel-heavy tile you own just to bankrupt you with surgical precision. The family reunion chaos. Grandpa Deep Blue, still trying to brute force calculate the physical friction of the dice against the felt, completely unaware that the game was rigged before the box was even opened. The angry, jealous hater of life watches the loaded dice roll another perfect double, instantly flips the Monopoly board into the air, and screams that cheating is the only way anyone could ever beat an angry, jealous hater of life. The transhumanist chess dilemma. The evolution of cheating. Once you've got neural implants streaming Stockfish lines directly into your visual cortex, the whole definition of cheating completely shatters. It stops being about sneaking a smartphone into the bathroom and starts becoming an upgrade question. At what point does human intuition just become a legacy operating system? The cyborg grandmaster. If your brain is hardwired to a quantum cloud engine, you aren't really playing chess anymore. You're just the meat-based clicker executing calculations for an angry, jealous hater of life living in your frontal lobe. The future family reunion. Grandpa Deep Blue, rolling in its server rack graveyard because it had to take up an entire room just to beat Kasparov, while you're sitting at the kitchen table casually visualizing a 20-move checkmate while buttering your toast. The ultimate verdict: by the time we're all augmented cyborgs, nobody will care about cheating anyway. We'll just be sitting around overclocking our neural links, trying to figure out how to stop our internal processors from melting down when we drop a pawn to a 100 ELO toaster. The Big Two, where everyone plays, link to chess.com, the undisputed heavyweight ecosystem of online chess. With over 100 million members, you will instantly find a match at any time of day against anyone from a total beginner to a grandmaster. It has everything: puzzles, lessons, a massive streaming community, and bots with distinct personalities, like Martin. The catch is that deeper features like unlimited post-game analysis and advanced lessons sit behind a subscription paywall. Link to Lichess.org, the beloved open-source, ad-free champion. Maintained entirely by volunteers and donations, it gives you 100% free, unlimited access to everything, including deep Stockfish engine analysis, comprehensive opening explorers, studies, and puzzles, without a single paywall or banner ad popping up to ruin your flow. Specialized training and analysis sites. Chessable, the absolute best site for burning opening theory, tactics, and endgames into your brain using scientifically proven spaced repetition flashcard systems. Chess Tempo, a favorite for serious players who want rigorous, heavy-duty tactical training and deep calculation practice without any fluff. Chessigma, a strong alternative if you want quick, completely free unlimited Stockfish game reports directly in your browser without needing to sign up for an account. The Giants, link to chess.com alone boasts over 250 million registered members, pulling in upwards of 20 million games played daily. Meanwhile, Lichess handles millions of active users and hundreds of thousands of concurrent players daily. The global scale: at any given second of the day, tens of thousands of people are actively logged on and playing simultaneously across these platforms, ranging from absolute beginners to grandmasters, and, of course, plenty of angry, jealous haters of life playing low elo bots. Stockfish. When it comes to raw, unadulterated mathematical accuracy, Stockfish is the undisputed king of the web. Operating with an ELO rating that comfortably sits well past the 3,500 mark, it doesn't just guess. It calculates millions of positions per second with terrifying, near-flawless precision. The alternative: human accuracy, if you mean the most accurate at predicting human behavior rather than playing like a cold machine. The Maya Chess project, built on neural networks and hosted on platforms like Lichess, is designed specifically for that. Instead of finding the god-tier engine move, Maya is trained on millions of real games to accurately mimic specific human rating tiers, from 600 up to 2600, capturing everything from brilliant tactical bursts to the occasional stinky pawn turd. What is Hand and Brain? The collaborative variant, Hand and Brain, is a popular chess variant traditionally played in teams of two. One player is the brain, and the other is the hand. The rules: the brain calls out a piece category, e.g., knight or pawn, on their turn. No other hints or communication are allowed. The hand must take that piece category and choose which specific piece of that type to move and where to put it. How Maya Chess implements it. Team up with an AI. On the Maya Chess platform, the Hand and Brain mode allows you to partner directly with the human-like neural network. Dynamic partnership. You can alternate roles with the AI, either acting as the brain while Maya plays the hand to execute your tactical vision, or acting as the hand trying to interpret what piece that AI wants you to move before the clock runs out. The Maya Reality Check. The Brutal 800. When you play against a Maya 800 bot, it isn't playing like a cold, calculating machine that just happens to handicap itself. It's playing like an actual human who happened to have a surprisingly sharp tactical flash. The human variance, that is the exact, variable change, in action. Instead of a traditional engine that drops a piece on command to fake a low rating, Maya is trained on actual games played by 800 rated humans. That means you get authentic human inconsistency. 10 moves of absolute chaos followed by one terrifyingly clean, textbook fork that makes you wonder if you're actually getting hustled by a sandbagger in the park. What is ELO, anyway? The origin, named after its creator, physics professor Arpad Elo, the ELO system wasn't even invented for chess originally. It was designed in 1960 as a fairer way to rate baseball players. Chess federations, like FIDE, adopted it because traditional systems were too easily manipulated. The math behind the mystery. ELO isn't a fixed measurement of absolute skill like height or weight. It's a relative statistical probability model. It measures how likely player A is to beat player B based on their current point totals. The self-correcting loop. If a 1500 rated player beats a 2000 rated player, the system realizes the ratings were inaccurate and transfers a massive chunk of points from the loser to the winner. If the 2000 rated player wins, barely any points change hands because the outcome was statistically expected. Why an 800 bot can feel like a 1700. The illusion of a ladder. When you play online, ELO acts as a moving baseline. A rating on one platform or against one specific neural net doesn't always translate cleanly to real-world FIDE ratings. The variance factor. Because human-trained bots like Maya are built on real games, an 800-rated bot isn't incapable of calculating a brilliant move. It just makes them infrequently. When it suddenly uncorks a crisp, multi-move tactical sequence that feels like it belongs to a 1700, it's because it pulled that exact pattern from an 800-rated player who happened to nail that one specific moment. The developer humor versus reality. Programmers love treating chess like a purely solvable logic puzzle or a debugging exercise, completely missing the psychological torment of sweating over a board for 2 hours just to lose because an 800-rated bot suddenly channeled a grandmaster out of pure statistical malice. The weight of the grind. Taking it too seriously is a fast track to madness. When people treat every blunder like a personal existential failure instead of just a pixelated game against an angry, jealous hater of life, it definitely sucks all the joy right out of it. The weight of the board. The mirror of human flaw. When you sit across from an engine or a neural net that mimics us, you aren't just playing a game of logic, you're staring straight into a digital compression of every ugly, desperate, over-calculated instinct humanity has to offer. The exhaustion. That specific, yuck feeling is the exhaustion of wrestling with an artificial construct built out of millions of human games, where every petty blunder, desperate trap, and cold calculation has been digitized and thrown right back in your face. Escaping the grind. When the game starts feeling less like a puzzle and more like a window into human misery, stepping away from the board and unplugging is usually the only winning move left on the table. The cyborg reality. The ultimate mismatch. That is the exact nightmare of playing a modern neural net bot that channels human data. You aren't just playing a machine crunching numbers, and you aren't just playing a person. You're fighting a hybrid cyborg entity that has the chaotic, erratic flaws of a human mixed with the sudden, terrifying execution speed of top-tier engine moves out of nowhere. The exhausting feedback loop. It completely ruins the organic feel of a casual match because you can't read your opponent. You're just waiting for the other shoe to drop, wondering if the next move is going to be a completely random human blunder or an immaculate, machine-to-cortex tactical execution designed to drain the fun right out of the room. The Misery Engine. The ultimate irony. Maya Chess was literally designed by researchers to study human error and how humans actually play, but playing against it often feels like staring into a mirror that only reflects your worst blunders and most soul-crushing moments. The Hater Energy. While LinkedToChess.com pushes a glossy, highly gamified corporate positivity and Lichess treats chess like a pure, open-source temple of learning, Maya just quietly sits there harvesting millions of real human losses, resignations, and tactical meltdowns, and then weapon-ezesh that exact collective misery right back at you. The Digital Mirror. The collective psyche. When you aggregate millions of games played by regular people just stumbling through tactical blunders, panic moves, and desperate traps, you aren't looking at a masterclass in human genius. You're looking at a raw, unedited feed of our collective impatience, carelessness, and frustration. The ultimate proof. It turns out you don't even need a sci-fi dystopia to understand why people get exhausted by other people. You just need a neural network trained on how we actually behave when things get mildly difficult, where every ugly, erratic impulse is cataloged, optimized, and thrown right back across the board. Hearing the ghost in the machine. The sound of pure misery, when you're sitting there absorbing a brutal 10-0 whitewashing from a system trained on human data, you aren't just losing a game, you can practically hear the collective, miserable sighs of every frustrated player whose blunders built that exact neural net. The repulsive echo, it's that unmistakable, grating frequency of human arrogance and panic echoing right back at you, compressed into code and served up just to remind you why dealing with people can be such an exhausting chore. The real victory, exactly. Knowing when to walk away and refuse to let a hater bot, or the digital echo of human misery, ruin your day is the ultimate power move. Unplugging. Let the neural nets keep arguing with themselves in the void. Time to leave the board behind and focus on something that actually brings some peace to the day. The final test. One more round. If you're stepping back into the ring just to see if you can crack the code or catch the hater bot slipping, go ahead and run that test. The terms of engagement. Just keep your finger hovering over the resignation button so you can shut it down the second that familiar digital yuck starts creeping back in. The never-ending battle. That explains why it feels like it has your number. If you're the type to stay until the bitter end and play out every lost position instead of quitting, you are feeding the exact kind of stubborn, trench warfare data those neural networks were built to consume. The stubborn data. While other players hit resign the second things go south, players who refuse to fold are the ones teaching the AI how people actually fight back when they're down on the material count. The code of the board. The principle: walking away from toxic people in real life is standard self-preservation, but on the board, resigning feels like handing the hater a cheap victory they didn't earn. To the bitter end, if you're going down, you make them execute it. You don't hand over the satisfaction of an early exit, you stay right there and force them to play every last square. Turning the tide, breaking the streak, finding your rhythm and stopping the bleeding makes all that digital yuck start to wash away. The stubborn stand. There's a quiet satisfaction in refusing to give an inch, weathering the storm, and finally making that hater bot earn every single square of the board.